So this is what motivated the analysis that my co-authors and I did for how to finance life itself. Now, actually, what I really should be doing in order to reduce the negative connotations here is I should be really calling this financing health as opposed to financing life. But I'm doing this on purpose because, as I said, I want to make you uncomfortable. And so you understand what's at stake here and what the issues are. So financing life means taking a one-time cure that may be very expensive because what you're getting for a one-time cure, what you're getting is a lifetime of health, right? So what you're buying is a stream of services. Just like when you buy a house, you don't get to live in the house for just a week or a month. You're buying an infinite stream of services to live in the house. So financing a cure like hepatitis C, to hepatitis C like Sovaldi, is getting a stream of benefits. So why not match the stream of payments with the stream of benefits? So we showed in lecture 2 that if you just use the simple mortgage formula, you could actually turn this $84,000 into a much, much more manageable monthly mortgage, a drug mortgage. And now you're in a position to understand exactly how we did it. I won't go through the details. You have the paper. And now that we've gone through securitization last week, you know what the innovation is. So many people have suggested this idea of a drug mortgage. Our innovation was to say, let's repackage it and sell out the tranches to get more money in the system. And so what we do is to talk about getting 12,000 consumers taking out loans for these therapies. And then we create a senior tranche, a junior tranche, and an equity tranche, just like the simulations we did last week in the mega fund. But this time, the underlying asset is not biomedical projects. The underlying asset is a drug mortgage or a healthcare loan. HCL is what we call it. So if you had 12,000 consumers that took out these healthcare loans, and we create these kinds of securitized structures, what kind of returns would investors get? And so in this paper that I referenced last time, but I'll take you through a little bit of the numbers now, it turns out that using this distribution of default probabilities from the student loan market, we actually look at various different tranches of risks for student loans, and we calibrate our simulations to that, as well as the mortality rates of different people in our pool of 12,000. If we did that and simulated what it would look like to have this kind of a securitization of these 12,000 loans, what we find is something I was blown away by. We find that the IRR of the equity tranche, what the equity holders get, is about 13% return. And the senior tranche gets 2.1% yield. The junior tranche gets 2.5% yield. Those are market yields at the time we wrote the paper. And the default rates, based upon the student loan calibrations, are actually right in line with how they're rated in the marketplace. So this seems really doable from our perspective. You can actually create these kinds of healthcare loans and allow investors to fund them. Now, there is an issue about who pays. And we talked briefly about this last time, so let me go through it now in more detail and describe the fact that the answer about who pays really hinges on how insurance works. And the bottom line is that it's going to be hard in the short run to be able to get insurance companies or governments to pay. But in the very long run, you might expect that government will pay if this is such an important public health issue, in the same way that the government pays for measles vaccines or smallpox vaccines. We might get the government to pay for these kinds of vaccines, therapies. However, that's the very long run. What about insurance companies? Well, this is now the long run issue. Insurance companies are really intermediaries. So what they're trying to do is to pool risks of a large group of people and then charge a premium in order to be able to provide that service. If they cannot adequately capture the risks and match that to the premiums, they can't stay in business. And one of the issues that insurance companies have right now is that if you are going to be coming to me, the insurance company, with a life-threatening illness that I pay to cure, then you're going to be healthy for a longer period of time, then in principle you should be able to pay me more premiums. But if you leave my plan and move to California, I'm out the cost of your cure, but I don't get the benefits of that stream of payments. So in order to deal with that issue, we actually have to include an additional rider to this pre-existing conditions clause that's currently in the Affordable Care Act, which is to include as pre-existing conditions, pre-existing financial conditions. Anyway, I won't go to the details, but the bottom line is that right now, insurance companies are not set up to do this. So in the short run, the only choice that I see is to have patients, family members, friends, nonprofits cover the cost of these extraordinary therapies. And this is a very, very controversial outcome because, frankly, many people feel that it's offensive to mortgage your health. And I agree that it's offensive, but I think it's more offensive to let people die when we have the means to save them. And so this starts to get at some of the ethical issues here, right? And let me give you a clear example of what the trade-offs are. So first of all, this idea of a drug mortgage, I think, has a lot of benefits to it. You actually have skin in the game, literally. By investing in this kind of a health care loan, you will actually focus more on your own health. And you might take care of your health better in the same way that when you buy a condo, you're a lot more careful about taking care of your apartment or condo than if you're renting. It's a very different attitude. And so there are lots of benefits for being able to use these healthcare mortgages, in addition to benefits in incentivizing drug companies. For example, if you buy a cure and the cure doesn't work, then you stop paying. And so you align the interests of the drug company with the patient. However, here's a potential problem. The potential problem is that right now, the biggest cause of bankruptcy is already healthcare expenses. There was a study done by a number of people, including Elizabeth Warren, before she became senator, where they looked at various different bankruptcies in the United States over a period of time, and they found that the single largest cause of bankruptcies have to do with unanticipated medical expenses. So we already have a situation where consumers are going bankrupt because of medical expenses. Do we want to saddle them with more debt? That's a problem. So we have to worry about the potential downside of this kind of an approach. The drawback of not allowing it is that consumers are going to go after these kinds of opportunities anyway. And what they're going to go after are things that may not be as legitimate. For example, there was a story in the New York Times a while ago that described an individual who had some chronic back pain and issues with a stroke, and he needed some therapy. So he ended up going to a foreign country to get some experimental stem cell therapy. And it turned out that it was not a legitimate kind of a operation. And the way that they discovered that he actually did this was he had developed a very large growth on his spinal cord. And when the surgeon, opened him up to deal with it, discovered that the cells in his body were not his own. They were from somebody else. And those stem cells had been implanted and had to be surgically removed. It was a very unfortunate example. The whole thing cost this individual $300,000. Now, you might say, well, gee, rich people can afford this. These are not rich people doing these crazy things for the most part. Because if you're really rich, you'll actually have very serious advisors that will tell you that this is a stupid waste of your time and money. You shouldn't be going to these countries to get these experimental therapies. They're middle-class people that are mortgaging their homes, their second mortgages, they're borrowing from friends and family to do this. And they will do this, like it or not. So one argument is that healthcare loans, where you actually control some of the therapies that they're having access to, could provide them with an avenue for these desperate individuals.